There are other stories that pop up in the news. I want to invite Mark Mix back in, president of the National Right to Work group. Hey, Mark, welcome back to the show.
Hey, glad to be on with you, and even more exciting to be on Kentucky Derby Week. Yeah. How about that? What day is this again today? 5-0 Tuesday?
5-0 Tuesday. Some clever marketing person came up with that.
Got it.
That's pretty awesome, right?
Yeah, very awesome. Very nice.
All right, you are the president of the National Right to Work Foundation, and I know that there was a story percolating at one of our Ford plants here locally, and through the United Auto Workers, the union that represents employees, because one of the employees there, at least one, challenged having her union dues taken from her check. Tell me more.
Yeah, Terry, this is unfortunately an all too familiar story when union officials try to abuse the rights of individual workers and large groups of workers for that matter. This happens a lot, unfortunately, across the country. This particular incident, it concerns the Ford Automotive Manufacturing Plant in Louisville and United Auto Workers Union Locals 862. Those two, both Ford and UAW Local 862, basically decided that what they were doing to this one particular worker was illegal, and the NLRB, Region 9 in Cincinnati, agreed. And so instead of having the court actually officially doom them for violations of this individual worker's rights, they decided to settle the case on behalf of this client, our client, Miss Green, who decided that her money was being taken illegally, union dues were taken illegally from her paycheck. First and foremost, Kentucky's a right-to-work state, so you cannot be compelled to pay dues or fees to a union in order to keep your job. But in this case, it went a little farther. The United Auto Workers Union and Ford were both guilty of violating, it never went to case, but they settled the case prior to being convicted of being guilty of violating her Section 7 rights to resign her union membership at any time, and then continue to take full dues from her paycheck. So the good news is she got all of her money back. The better news is that more workers in Louisville and that area listening here can exercise their rights as well.
In a right-to-work state, someone can work at a place that has a union shop, and a lot of people in the union will say, well, we're the ones who advanced the pay scale, for instance, and so that person is getting the benefit of union efforts without paying the dues. How do you answer that?
Yeah, Terry, that sounds like a really topically, likable issue from a standpoint of what union officials say. But the truth is a lot more involved. And the truth is that union officials force their representation on workers who never asked for the union, never wanted for the union, and never voted for the union. In fact, most of the Ford contracts, the UAW contracts with Ford Motor Companies, basically were settled in 1937 after the big strike in Flint up there, and the UAW got representational privileges over all workers. Today, actually, only about 6% of all union members in the country today have ever voted on whether or not they want to be in the union. So that is a legacy union contract. But the real issue there is the idea that they can force their representation on a worker. And, the assumption is, and what union officials want to portray, is that everything that the union does is beneficial to every worker. And Terry, anyone who tries to make everyone happy with all of their actions knows that's destined to failure, because there are a lot of workers out there that who basically are hindered and hurt by union contracts that limit their ability to be paid for productive activity or give them benefits, so-called benefits, that are valuable to one individual that may not be valuable to another. I mean, take, for example, a 63-year-old auto worker who's 2 years from retirement and a 20-year-old UAW member who's not thinking about retirement but thinking about a cash bonus or something like that. Mm-hmm. So the union can't please everyone, even though they try to convince us they do. And in this case, when you add on politics and ideological causes which they support, workers say, you know what, I'm not interested and I'd like to get out. In a right-to-work state, they can. In a forced unionism state, they can be terminated from their job if they don't pay dues or fees to a union.
But you guys are the safety net there to keep that from happening. That's what you're telling me?
Well, we certainly try to hold them accountable. When an employee like this contacts us and let us know that, the union's requiring that they go to the union hall in order to, quote, formally resign from their union, and they have to be interrogated as to why they want to leave, and then they have to sign a letter that says all of these bad things are probably going to happen to them if they get out of the union, and a union official says, if it were me, you'd lose your job. Those types of pressure tactics, that type of coercion can't exist and shouldn't exist under federal law or state law for that matter. And then when Ford continues to take the money, full dues out of someone's paycheck, notwithstanding the fact that they asked them to stop, that's another violation. So both Ford and UAW, when confronted with these charges, basically said, you know what, we shouldn't be doing this anymore, and therefore they agreed to settle. And this employee will get all the money back that they were illegally forced to pay going back to April of last year.
Does she get penalties or interest on top of that?
No, not interested in that, and really didn't ask for that. And frankly, just getting the relief and getting the remedy that the law offers her is the important part of this. I mean, we've had, other cases, like we've had a case on behalf of a flight attendant for Southwest Airlines who was fired from her job, not doing anything wrong other than questioning the leadership of a union official who the jury awarded $5.1 million to. So there's lots of extremes here, but in this case, this employee just wanted to exercise their basic rights under Kentucky's right to work law and the basic rights that are available to them under federal law as it relates to private sector employment, and that relief, that remedy was granted by both Ford and the UAW.
Okay, let me jump to one other topic before we go here, and that is President Biden's pick for Labor Secretary, Julie Su. I know that there's been some resistance to her selection by the Republican Party, and there are some Democrats that are a little skittish about voting for her as well. What's the status on her opportunity to be elevated to Labor Secretary?
Yeah, her nomination got out of committee last week and is so pending on the floor of the United States Senate right now and can be brought up at any time. Obviously, Chuck Schumer, the Democrat majority leader, controls the calendar in the Senate. But it appears right now, based on what we're hearing from the Hills, that there are a couple of Democrats, actually 4 or 5 now, that are expressing real concern over this nomination to run one of the biggest agencies here in Washington, D.C. And one of the reasons is because Julie Su had kind of an interesting track record when she had a similar position out in California working for now Governor Gavin Newsom, then as on the Labor Commission out there. She was responsible for the creation of a piece of legislation that Biden is trying to impose on the entire country as it relates to gig employees. Think about independent-minded contractors, photographers, translators, truck drivers, Ubers, Lyft. You got it, Terry. Where they have to be employees and basically can't continue on as independent contractors. And one of the real kind of simple reasons for that, you always wonder, what's the simplest reason for something like this happening? Well, unfortunately for union officials, you can't organize and unionize independent contractors, but you can organize and unionize employees. And so if they can get the designation of an Uber driver, a Lyft driver, a photographer, a musician, or someone who's kind of an independent contractor and require them to be employees, they can force them to pay dues. Her nomination vote seems to be a little bit under pressure from Joe Manchin from West Virginia, from Kristen Sinema from Arizona, from actually Angus King from Maine, from John Tester from Montana. And Terry, the common denominator in all of those names I just read is, you won't be surprised by this, but they're up for re-election in 2024.
Interesting.
So votes like this, yeah, no surprise there, right?
Exactly, yeah. Well, there are a lot of people in the gig economy, too, and they're fighting to stay afloat. So that would be another challenge. Yeah. All right, Mark, I'm out of time. Appreciate your thoughts on both those issues. Thanks so much.
Well, happy 5-0 Tuesday to you.
Good stuff, Mark. Appreciate that.